Hello, everybody, and what is it? Is it another DLC for Panzer 2? Damn right it is! Less than 2 months after the Spanish Civil War blasted the game with new mechanics and allies, we get Axis Operations 1939. And this is the first video in a series of 2, and today I'll cover the first half of DLC, from Czechoslovakia to the Battle of the Bazoona. And I guess this is as good a time as any to talk about the elephants in the room. So what kind of scenarios would you expect in a 1939 campaign? Is it Poland? Well, this DLC begs to differ. Out of 50 missions that he offers, we only have 6 missions in Poland and 5 missions playing, what is it? Tsar Offensive, which was a rather feeble attempt by the French to try and penetrate the German defenses, which were hardly existent at that point. It was a minor battle. And so it comes as no surprise that many people complained about this. They expected lots and lots of Poland, like the original 1939 DLC for Panzer 1, and who cares about this tiny little pipsqueak of a battle in France anyway? However, I don't subscribe to this view, and I believe this was a very interesting, if bold, move by the developers. On the one hand, the Grand Campaign of Panzer 1 has always been about focusing on minor battle and actually paying attention to all of the other things that happen, in addition to all of this standard stuff like Stalingrad or D-Day. So the question of scale here is not that valid. Yes, the Tsar Offensive was very small, but the question is not, was it very big? The question is, would it make interesting missions? And let me spoil it for you, it has. As to the historical significance, well, hindsight, as we know, is 2020, and those German troops in the west were facing a huge and really well-equipped French army, probing their defenses, and had the French been a bit more decisive, the resulting war could have been completely different. So to all of the French in 1939 haters out there, get some perspective and actually try and enjoy the missions because they're really fun. Back to other topics, and let's talk about the difficulty settings I've chosen, and if you have seen my Spanish Civil War videos, you more or less know what I have. So I'm playing on general difficulty with deep recon for better recons. With Master of Blitzkrieg, it's very difficult for me to play without it, mostly because of the additional movement. I generally don't like overstrengthening my units, so I've just switched it off for more command points. And I've chosen Trophies of War. Note that I'm not trying to build my strategy around it, and there are ways to do that. I just chose it because I could. And yes, even if you import your core from Spanish Civil War, you will be able to change the game settings, including the command points and commander traits. Furthermore, as far as I know, the developers are trying to make these Axis Operations DLC playable on their own, and if you've played the Grand Campaign in Panzer 1, you know that it's not the case there. You really need to hoard all of the prestige in earlier campaigns so that you have some prestige to spare in 1943 onwards. And to test that 1939 is really independent as a DLC, I've decided to do a parallel, on Generalissimus level no less, with no commander perks and with the default core that you're given, which is not as bad as you might think. You're given lots of troops with 1.5 stars of experience, and you're given quite a lot of heroes to spread around your troops. So clearly there has been some thought put into this, and let me tell you that I've actually managed to complete half of the DLC in this mode. By my ultimate conclusions will come at the end of this and the next video, and now let's talk about the missions. So the first mission comes before World War II, in March 1939, and the non-violent annexation of Czechoslovakia, which means you have to be non-violent in the Czechoslovakia mission. There is a pretty good incentive not to kill any enemy units in this mission, because you're given 5 commendation points right from the start, and if you kill anybody, the game will dock you 5 points, and you will really want to have them in the next mission. Make sure you pick up lots of 3.7 centimeter AT guns. You will need a deterrent against Czechoslovak tank attacks, which will happen, especially near the village you hold from the beginning of the mission. The enemy tanks will be able to squeeze in through there. Send one of your core groups to the west and make sure they have a bridging pioneer so that it can cross the river at the southwest, and send the rest of your troops eastwards in a pincer movement around the river. If you intend to win this mission by holding the marked hexes, you do actually have to hold them, so just leave your tanks tanks in the hex and make sure you protect it with the 3.7 centimeters anti-tank guns and 7.5 centimeters artillery. It'll be more than enough to hold those points even on generalissimus difficulty. In any case, you can take over Prague and Plzeň without any penalties or bonuses and without killing any enemies, so the game is not really forcing any of the options, so choose whatever you like. You can also easily encircle the enemy, and if you don't care about the commendation points, you can actually grab some prestige on surrenders. Now let's actually finally begin World War II. Alright, it's the 7th of September 1939 and we're on the west border of Germany, hoping the French don't attack. So, our mission in Sargimin is to lay as many minefields as possible. I deployed my main mobile assault group in the west, next to Ipling, which is rather poorly defended, and you will be able to easily cover those two minefields in the west. Use a bridging engineer to cross the river in the center and send a smaller attack group to take the undefended objective between Sargimin and Bliesbruck, and finally leave a small defensive detachment at the top center of the map next to the bunker. The French will launch a pretty serious assault in the northeast of the map, and I don't see any reason for you to counterattack there. Way too slow, way too costly. And now that you have taken over Rippling and that undefended objective, go ahead and encircle Sargimin. It's pretty easy. There will be a couple of half-hearted counterattacks, a couple of infantry units, and armored cars trying to relieve the town, but nothing serious. It is pretty well defended against planes and tanks, so be careful about that, but once they're surrounded, they'll go down pretty quickly, and now you've got 4 minefields done. I believe that the objective east of Sargimin is the hardest in this mission. With strong AT and AA artillery there, you will not be able to take it over with just tanks, so I prefer encircling them, letting them stew, and instead advance towards Bliesbruck, which is an easier target for a rapid tank-based attack. The mission actually has the first secret of the DLC, located in the supply points east of the objective east of Sargimin. You'll get 5 units of the wonderful Char B1 tank, and that's pretty much the theme with the French secrets in this DLC. Oh, and you will be prompted to spend 5 command points on a really nice, unique tank, anti-tank class commander, so not killing all those Czechs is really paying off. Warned Forest is the first really difficult mission of the DLC, so consider yourselves warned. I had to replay this scenario a bunch of times to get it right, even with my super experienced imported core force, and I found that the objective at the bottom left should come last. So using the spawn point in Forbach is really unnecessary. Also, the forested area between the bottom 3 objectives on the map is pretty difficult to clear and will slow you down, so you better just avoid it. So the plan is to send your infantry and artillery force directly into the nearest objectives in the forest, World War I style, but be prepared for enemy mobile counterattacks, so do have some ATs or at least AA guns in AT mode. Next up, you send your top tanks, your top artillery, and at least 1 top infantry unit through that thick forest in the east. The cheeky scenario designer made the red wind a little bit inside the forest, so it'll take some time for these troops to reach Saint Avold, but it's totally worth it. First of all, it's really hard to reach Saint Avold through other roads. They are longer and well protected, plus around turn 10 the French will initiate a counteroffensive in the bottom left corner of the map, and you really need your top troops in that area to flank that attack and distract them from the other objectives, which you should gradually pick up as you're dealing with Saint Avold. The supply point in Saint Avold also has another secret, which is, once again, Char B1 tanks, 5 units. My notes for Rorenthal say bottom right corner, nasty. And that's the thing that should pretty much define your strategy in this mission. You'll see a big French force attacking Bliesbruck and Mandelbachtal, and you won't have to worry about them unless you get too close, which means that the bottom left objectives should be taken last. Otherwise, my approach is to advance in the center, take the main objectives, and gradually, as you proceed, encircle Orenthal. It's exceedingly well protected, don't send any planes in there, it's riddled with AA. So encirclement and suppression is your best option, just make sure you use your top tanks to close the encirclement at the south, because there will be a small counterattack and you need to survive it. Otherwise, take one objective after the other, they're not too well protected, just make sure you don't attract the main French attacking forces. Oh, and there'll be more Char B1 tanks in the airport of Orenthal. Forbach is an optional mission that you can take, and it's a cute little puzzle right before the hardest and the last mission of the 1939 campaign against France. Its briefing pretty much lays the entire strategy bare. You can pretty easily kill all of the sentries on turn 1, and then use one or two of your recon units to move down the central road and cause mayhem in there. You might actually need to reload the mission a few times, because the transports in the middle don't really move in a way you really want them to. You really need to destroy or damage them so that the blue guys start moving into the center and attacking the red guys. The two French factions are technically opposed to each other, so if the AI sees the quote-unquote enemy, they will attack. Make sure you bide your time with the rest of your troops, keeping out of sight near Forbach and Ipling, and as soon as you see enemy reinforcements move away towards the center of the map, especially at Forbach, just attack. Don't worry about the losses, you're not gonna see these guys anymore ever again, and destroy the enemy depots. That's pretty much the mission. Oh, and one of the hexes in Forbach contains, you guessed it, Char B1 tanks. Saarbrücken is the last mission of the French part of this campaign, and my god, it's a huge and tough defensive battle. Make sure you bring all of the AA capability that you can muster. Fighters, heavy fighters, and especially AA guns, which will be very helpful, not least because of the hills, and because you won't be able to cover everything with your fighters. We've got 3 towns to defend, and Saarbrücken is the easiest of them all, what with the hills, which are really nice for artillery and AAs, and the positioning of the city hexes behind the river. That's a very advantageous position, and if you find this mission too hard, retreat to Saarbrücken on turn 1, and you will be able to stem the tide there. Gersweiler in the west is the trickiest objective of them all, because of the geographic features that are harder to defend there. It's mostly hills, not a city, plus there are many entry points for the enemy to slip through and for you to forget about or not notice, so be very careful about Gersweiler, and definitely leave a tank or two as a fire brigade to counterattack anyone who crosses the river. And speaking of crossing the river, the French have many bridge engineers, and they can throw a huge spanner in your works if you let them do their job. So make them a priority target. The secondary objective is to raid the airfields in front of Hallberg. This is a good place to concentrate most of your tanks and planes in, and once you've dealt with the airfields, you will be able to use these troops as a sort of a mobile defense force, so you really don't need anything static in Hallberg. Use your tanks and bombers to defend there. Saarbrücken can also become a huge sink for your commendation points, as you are offered to spend 6 points to buy another unique hero, which is Oller Deer, well known to the veterans of Panzer Corps 1 and probably hated by many of them for being OP. The Panzer Corps 2 version is pretty strong, but I think it's slightly more balanced. You will also be prompted to buy a gift Sommois S-35 tank, which is a pretty nice addition to your fleet, so go ahead, take it. So, the last scenario for today, and our first battle in Poland finally, and it's the Battle of the Bazoona! I should stop doing that. I feel kind of nostalgic about it, because it was featured in the first game under the name Piontek, which is one of the towns in the area, and it was the first proper defensive scenario in Panzer Corps 1. In this game, this is a semi-defensive scenario. You're supposed to take objectives from the enemy, but the enemy will retaliate pretty hard. So let's look at the objectives one by one, and let's start with the easiest. Piontek. The objective is on your side of the river, so taking it is not a problem, and since it's a city hex behind the river, it's pretty easy to defend. There is a river crossing west of it, which is not defended at all, so send a raiding force through it, take over those flags, and encircle the defenders at Piontek. Then proceed to Kutno, where most defenders are static, and the story will essentially repeat. Once Kutno is yours, you can devote these troops to help your units in the east, but make sure you leave someone to cover the victory hex there, because you really need to hold it. To complete that objective, and just a single enemy armored car can make this impossible. At Warwich, the strategy is very simple. Take the hex and stop. This is the focus of the enemy offensive, and they'll flood this area with craploads of units, so avoid breaking through at all costs. But keep an eye out on that river crossing between Piontek and Warwich. The AI is clearly scripted to test your defenses in there, and if you don't have any, they will gladly send strong cavalry to flank you. Otherwise, Warwich is easily defensible with one strong infantry unit, one 15cm artillery unit, so that it provides AT support, and perhaps one tank. So Harchov and the hex next to it are the only places where you really need to break through to take them over, and my suggestion is that you should bide your time. Bring lots of artillery, bring pioneers, recons and a couple of tanks may help out as well, and then break through at the top objective, then flanking the town. Attacking it head-on is possible, but just more difficult. In any case, the enemy will not have many reinforcements there, so you don't really need to hurry there. So go slow, and don't worry about missing just the right moment to attack. Oh, and this mission has 2 secret locations, actually. Those unassuming little villages at the bottom right. They hide a few crappy Polish tanks and a few pretty decent Polish armored cars, which might be worth picking up. Just make sure you don't rush into those places. They're covered by infantry. And that's part 1 of my overview on the 1939 DLC for Panzer Corps 2. I've really enjoyed it so far. I love the French missions and some of the inventiveness that went into them, and I'm happy to say that my parallel on Generalissimus without importing any corps from Spanish Civil War goes okay. I've been able to complete half of the campaign. It's pretty tough, and I wasn't able to get the secondary objectives everywhere, especially in Varnt Forest. It's pretty tough in there, but otherwise the DLC seems to be rather playable on its own. So let's see how I fare in its second half. And now a little joke to end this video. How do you call a popular chain of lingerie shops in France? Braguette. Nice!